moment you stop reacting, their whole performance starts shaking from the inside. That is when you finally see the panic behind all their confidence. Because narcissists do not need connection as much as they need emotional control. And your reaction has always been part of the control they were feeding on. If this pattern keeps happening around you, you are not crazy or too sensitive. You have probably been trained to think every conflict is somehow your fault, and that training makes their chaos feel normal until one day it doesn't. This video is about what really happens when you stop feeding the machine, not by fighting harder, but by becoming unavailable to the game itself. I know how confusing this feels because silence can look weak at first, especially when you have spent years defending yourself, explaining yourself, and proving your intentions. You think if you just say it better, they will finally act right. But narcissists are rarely confused by your words. They are threatened by your clarity. So when you stop reacting, you are not withdrawing love or losing strength. You are cutting off the emotional supply that kept their manipulation looking powerful. And that is exactly why they suddenly escalate, guilt trip, or play victim. They panic because your calm exposes something they worked hard to hide. Their control was never strength. It was dependence wearing a loud costume. The first thing to understand is that your reaction gave them information. It told them where you hurt, where you doubted, and where to push. Every explanation showed them what pressure made you fold and chase peace. Every long text taught them exactly how to keep you emotionally occupied. So when you stop reacting, they lose data, leverage, and their favorite doorway. That loss does not feel small to them. It feels like danger. Because drama was never random. It was a test of your accessibility. If they could upset you, they could still reach inside your nervous system. If they could bait you, they could still steer the interaction easily. And if they could make you explain, they could keep you defending. That is why your calm makes them more unstable than your anger. Anger still proves they matter. Calm tells them access is ending now. That is the part most people miss when they call you cold. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming unreadable to someone exploitive. And manipulators hate unreadable people because unreadable people are harder to move. This is where their panic starts showing up in very predictable forms. They may suddenly become sweeter as if they finally understand everything now. That is not always growth. Sometimes it is just a softer hook. They may start a crisis the moment your attention drifts back to yourself. A health scare, a family emergency, a dramatic confession, a sudden collapse. Not because every crisis is fake, but because timing can reveal intention. They may accuse you of changing, becoming selfish, or acting like you're better. Translation: your new boundary is interrupting the role they assigned to you. In their system, your job was to absorb pressure and keep things comfortable. The second you stop doing that, they suddenly call you difficult and disrespectful. But difficult to who? Usually to the person who benefited from your discomfort. A healthy person may dislike your boundary, but they can still respect it. A toxic person treats your boundary like betrayal because it blocks their access. That difference matters because not every difficult person is toxic or narcissistic. Some people are immature. Some are wounded. Some are simply bad at communication. But narcissistic panic has a specific flavor. It appears when control starts slipping, not when you harm them, not when you are cruel, when you detach. That is why the backlash can feel so unfair and so revealing. Think about the parent who calls only to unload guilt and obligation. The moment you stop defending your schedule, suddenly you are ungrateful and heartless. You did not become cruel. You just stopped offering explanations they could weaponize. Or the ex who keeps manufacturing emergencies after the relationship is already over. They do not want closure. They want proof they can still pull you back. When you answer with less emotion, they raise the stakes and change tactics. Suddenly they are nostalgic, wounded, furious, charming, sick, spiritual, or deeply misunderstood. Same agenda, different costume. They just need you emotionally reattached somehow again. Another version hides behind concern, especially with fake friends and intrusive relatives. They ask how you are, but they are really checking whether you are reachable again. The conversation feels caring until your answer stops feeding them private details. Then the warmth disappears, and suddenly you are secretive, distant, or suspicious. What changed was not your honesty. What changed was their access to your interior. Information is power to people who enjoy leverage far more than intimacy. So when you stop oversharing, they feel locked out of a room they owned. And locked out people often become insulting long before they become accepting. This is why your privacy is not cruelty. It is protection now. You are allowed to become harder to read when someone reads you like prey. The workplace version can be even harder to spot at first sometimes. A controlling boss sends late messages, then acts offended when you answer tomorrow. They say they need commitment, but what they really want is unscheduled access. When you reply, "I'm available during work hours," watch the mood shift. Suddenly you are not a team player. Suddenly, your tone is the issue. Again, Translation, they are angry because convenience just lost its private doorway. Narcissists hate limits most when limits are calm, short, and consistent with you. Because a calm limit gives them nothing dramatic to grab onto there. No explosion to attack. No paragraph to twist. No emotional opening left. Just a clean wall standing where they expected an easy door back inside. And that is why your non-reaction feels louder than any speech you gave. Here is one truth that can save you years of confusion later. When narcissists say you changed, they usually mean you became harder to manipulate. They miss the old version of you that was easier to corner, easier to guilt, easier to scare, easier to pull into defending yourself. And because they cannot say that out loud, they moralize your boundary instead. They call it rude, cold, dramatic, disrespectful, selfish, or cruel to them. Notice how their labels always appear right after your access becomes limited. That timing tells the story better than anything they're saying now. And remember, a boundary is about what you will do, not what they must do. Control says, change yourself so I can feel okay without doing my part. A boundary says, if this continues, I will step back from here. That distinction matters because narcissists often accuse you of control to hide theirs. They hate consequences, then call the consequence manipulation when it finally arrives. But consequences are not abuse when they are clearly stated and consistently kept. Then here's the part that makes your silence so unexpectedly powerful. Silence forces them to face themselves without your energy cushioning the impact. Your reaction used to distract from what they were actually doing there. Once you stop reacting, the manipulation becomes visible, even to them sometimes. And people who survive by distortion hate moments of sudden clarity most. That is why they may provoke harder after you start healing seriously. Not because healing is fake, but because healing changes your availability completely. You no longer chase every misunderstanding like your identity depends on it. You no longer rush to prove your heart to someone studying weaknesses. And that breaks the cycle more than any perfect speech ever could. Maybe it is a sibling who only calls when they need money or access. The first time you say, I can't help with that, the contempt appears. Not because your answer was harsh, but because entitlement just met a limit. Maybe it is a coworker who jokes at your expense, then hides behind humor. When you stop laughing and simply stare, their charm starts glitching immediately. Because mockery depends on your participation more than they want to admit. Now let's talk strategy because some situations require more than inspiration alone. If you live with them, work with them, or share children, be strategic. Not every situation is safe for dramatic confrontation or instant no contact. Sometimes power looks like saying less, documenting more, and moving quietly forward. Sometimes the smartest boundary is boring, repeatable, emotionally flat, and impossible to argue with. You do not need a perfect speech. You need a stable pattern. That sounds like, that doesn't work for me, and then silence afterward. Or, my answer is the same, without new reasons added underneath today. Or simply, I'm not discussing this when they keep circling for weakness. Those phrases work because they close doors without opening another debate afterward. Narcissists thrive in the space between your boundary and the guilt that follows. So do not rush to soften your no just because they look wounded. A wounded look is not always pain. Sometimes it is strategy instead. The pause is one of your strongest nonverbal weapons, and they know it. When you stop filling silence, they lose the chance to steer you. When you keep your tone flat, their bait has nowhere to land. When you do not explain after the limit starts breathing. That is what unnerves them. Your boundary begins standing without emotional scaffolding. And once a boundary can stand alone, manipulation loses much of its magic. But expect a final push, because loss of control often creates desperation. They may send a long message, rewriting history and recasting themselves as wounded. They may gather allies and start a quiet smear campaign around you. That smear campaign means private control failed, so now they need image control. And if other people believe the version they sell, let that teach you something. Anyone who needs your side destroyed before hearing your side was never safe. You cannot out-explain a smear campaign to people invested in convenience. Protect your records, protect your peace, and stop auditioning for fair treatment. They may go cold and call it space, growth, or needing peace. Sometimes silence is healthy. Sometimes silence is punishment disguised as maturity instead. The difference is intent. Healthy distance protects peace. Manipulative distance enforces pain. A healthy person steps back without trying to destabilize your sense of reality. A toxic person steps back hoping you will crawl forward and beg. That is why no reaction is not passivity when it is chosen clearly. It is emotional self-defense without the noise they trained you to produce. And yes, at first it can feel unnatural, even guilty, even rude, because you are rewarded for self-abandonment and punished for self-containment. You learn that peace meant keeping them comfortable, even when it cost you. So of course your nervous system shakes when you choose yourself differently. If you are raised around narcissistic patterns, reaction may feel like survival. Reading the room, soothing tension, predicting moods, staying useful, staying small daily. So when you stop reacting, part of you may fear punishment is coming. That fear deserves compassion, but it does not deserve control of your future. You can be scared and still be done, being easy to exploit. But shaking does not mean wrong. It often means unfamiliar and necessary. Let that sink in when the guilt hits after a clean boundary. Guilt does not always a sign you did harm. Sometimes it means conditioning. The deeper truth is this: narcissists panic when you stop performing your old role. The rescuer, the explainer, the emotional sponge, the one who always returns. When that version of you disappears, their script starts failing in real time. And they call that failure your cruelty because they cannot name their dependency. But you do not owe anyone endless access just to prove you're good. You do not owe explanations that become weapons in somebody else's hands. You do not owe emotional labor to people committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is almost nothing at all. No, not this time. I already answered that. I am leaving this conversation now. Then let the silence do what explanations never could do for you. Let it reveal who respected you and who only respected your compliance. If someone punishes your peace, they were benefiting from your chaos before. If someone mocks your boundary, they are confessing what they wanted access to most. If someone calls your calm cold, remember they preferred you easier to shake. This is not about becoming hard. It is about becoming harder to use. If this hit something real, tell me which phrase you needed most today. And if you're done over-explaining, stay here and keep building that calm power. Your peace gets stronger every time you stop performing for someone else's chaos. The game ends exactly where your reaction used to begin for them.